If you look carefully at the trajectory of human history, you will notice that our greatest threats have rarely been the ones we could see. Civilizations did not collapse solely because of invading armies or natural disasters. More often, they unraveled from within, through ideas left unexamined, technologies misunderstood, and fears left unnamed. Today, we stand in a similar moment. We face what I call the secret crises, challenges that do not announce themselves with explosions or headlines, but quietly reshape our societies, our attention, and even our sense of meaning. These crises operate in the background. The overload of information, the erosion of focus, the rise of algorithmic influence, and the silent pressure to run faster than our own humanity can sustain. And like every crisis in history, these two offer a choice. We can ignore them and allow them to shape our destiny, or we can confront them with clarity, self-awareness, and courage. Because ultimately, the greatest power humans have ever possessed is the ability to tell new stories about themselves and then act on those stories. There comes a time in the unfolding story of humanity when the greatest turning points do not arrive with the sound of trumpets or the march of armies, but with whispers, whispers so subtle that they pass through the minds of billions unnoticed. Yet these whispers shape empires, technologies, desires, fears, and destinies. We live in such a time now, a time when the forces that transform the world do not stand upon mountains or speak through kings, but emerge quietly from circuits, data streams, economic systems, and the unexamined corners of the human heart. And it is here, in these unseen places, that the secret crises of our age are being born. The ancestors who came before us faced storms made of flesh and fire. They stood against invaders, famine, plague, and drought. They survived the rise and fall of kingdoms carved from stone and ambition. They faced threats that could be grasped, named, pointed to across the horizon. But our age is different. The crises of our era do not march toward us, they grow within us. They are stitched into the fabric of our routines, our habits, our technologies, and our beliefs. And the danger of a hidden crisis is not merely the damage it causes, but the blindness it cultivates. If you study the arc of history, you find a pattern. Civilizations rarely collapse because of the final blow that struck them. They collapse because of the wounds they never saw forming. While leaders debated policy, the foundations of meaning were eroding. While merchants traded goods, the currency of trust was decaying. While citizens lived their lives unaware, the stories that held their world together were weakening thread by thread. What brings down a great power is not usually a single event, but a long forgetting. Forgetting what made it strong, forgetting what made it human, forgetting the truths that once bound communities, families, and souls. And so it is with us. We live in an age of staggering progress, machines that learn, networks that span continents, knowledge that expands with every passing moment. Yet beneath all this brilliance, a quiet transformation is unfolding. It is not a crisis of technology or economics alone. It is the crisis of the human mind and spirit navigating a world it did not evolve to understand. We have gained extraordinary power, but have lost the stillness required to wield it with wisdom. We have unlocked vast oceans of information, but have forgotten how to discern truth. We are more connected than ever, but increasingly alone. And while we chase the next innovation, we risk losing the ancient foundation upon which meaning, dignity, and identity rest. This is the first of the secret crises. The crisis of overwhelming information coupled with diminishing understanding. In past eras, information was scarce. Knowledge was a treasure guarded by temples, universities, or royal courts. To know was to hold power. To not know was to remain in the shadows. But today, the floodgates have opened. The world produces more information in a single day than ancient civilizations produced in centuries. Yet this abundance does not bring clarity, it brings confusion. We stand in the midst of a digital hurricane, assaulted by headlines, notifications, opinions, algorithms, predictions, and messages. But the mind was not crafted to hold so many voices. The heart was not designed to be pulled in 1,000 directions before the sun has even risen. We scroll endlessly, believing that movement is meaning. We react instantly, believing that reaction is engagement. We consume constantly, believing that consumption is knowledge. But in the speed of this new world, reflection becomes a luxury few can afford. The ability to step back, to question, to contemplate the deeper forces shaping our lives, that ability is quietly fading. When a people lose the capacity for reflection, they become vulnerable not to the enemies who attack them from without, but to the illusions that rise within. But behind the crisis of information lies another crisis, even quieter, even deeper, the crisis of attention. For attention is not merely a mental resource, it is the doorway through which we build our understanding of reality. Whatever commands your attention shapes your beliefs. Whatever shapes your beliefs shapes your decisions. And whatever shapes your decisions shapes your destiny. Yet our attention is no longer ours. It is bought, sold, harvested, traded, and weaponized. Entire industries are built not to inform you, but to capture you, to hold you, to keep you tethered to the endless stream. What is taken from you in this exchange is not just your time, it is the ability to choose what truly deserves your focus. And what becomes of a generation whose attention is fragmented? What becomes of a society whose collective focus is scattered into millions of PIECs? It becomes a society unable to think deeply, unable to unite meaningfully, unable to stand firmly. It becomes a people who drift through life, pulled not by purpose but by distraction. And distraction, as subtle as it may seem, has shaped more downfalls than catastrophe ever has. For a distracted soul is easily manipulated. A distracted mind is easily deceived. A distracted civilization is easily led away from its own values without ever realizing it. Yet even this is not the deepest of the hidden crises. Beneath the crisis of information and the crisis of attention lies a crisis more profound, the crisis of meaning. Throughout history, human beings survived hardship not because they possessed advanced tools or abundant resources, but because they possessed meaning. Meaning is the compass of the human spirit. It tells us who we are, why we are here, what we must do. It gives us the strength to endure suffering, the courage to face uncertainty, the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than ourselves. But in the modern world, meaning has become increasingly fragile. We have built societies where the traditional anchors of meaning, community, family, faith, shared stories, have grown thinner. We have replaced them with systems of consumption, productivity, and self-expression that promise fulfillment but often deliver emptiness. We have been told that meaning is a personal invention, that identity is a customizable accessory, that truth is subjective, that purpose is optional. Yet the human heart cannot thrive on endless choice without direction. The soul does not flourish when it is left to invent its own universe from scratch. When everything becomes possible but nothing feels significant, a quiet despair begins to form. It is a despair that does not scream or break into our homes. It simply settles like a shadow over the spirit. This crisis of meaning is the reason so many feel restless even when surrounded by comfort. It is why anxiety rises even in the absence of visible threat. It is why the younger generations inherit not only a world of opportunities, but a burden of existential confusion. And in this confusion, new forces rise to fill the void. Ideologies, movements, narratives, technologies, each promising identity, certainty, belonging. But not all who promise meaning bring wisdom. Not all who offer clarity bring truth. In times of meaning crisis, humanity becomes vulnerable to illusions that appear as salvation. Yet deeper still lies another silent crisis, the crisis of selfhood. For as the world, the networks, the systems, and the algorithms grow more complex, the question of who we are becomes more blurred. Are we defined by our data, our memories, our genetics, our choices, our online personas, our emotional patterns? Throughout history, the answer to the question, who am I, was shaped by a shared story that gave individuals a place within something larger. But today, that story is fragmented. We live within overlapping entities, shifting roles, and competing narratives. The self becomes a puzzle with missing pieces, and a fractured self cannot bear the weight of modern life for long. Machines now predict what we will desire before we feel the desire. Programs know what we will buy, watch, listen to, believe, and fear. And while this may seem convenient, it nudges us toward a world where human beings slowly stop choosing and begin accepting choices made for them. When the power of choice diminishes, freedom becomes something we assume rather than exercise. And what is lost in this quiet shift is the authenticity of being human, the struggle, the uncertainty, the discovery, the revelation, all these hidden crises, information, attention, meaning, selfhood, intertwine into a larger crisis, the crisis of consciousness. Humanity has advanced its tools faster than it has advanced its inner wisdom. We have upgraded our machines, but not our understanding. We have connected the world, but disconnected from ourselves. We have conquered nature in many ways, but have not learned to govern our own impulses. And now, the imbalance grows greater with each passing year. Yet the crisis remains hidden because daily life continues. The sun rises, the markets open, the cities hum, the screens glow. People work, consume, entertain, scroll, respond, and sleep. From the outside, nothing seems amiss. But beneath the rhythm of ordinary life, the foundations are shifting, and history teaches one undeniable truth, that when the foundations shift, civilizations either awaken or fall. The secret crises of our age require courage. Courage not in the face of physical danger, but in the face of uncomfortable reflection. It is far easier to confront an enemy you can see than a crisis that operates within your daily habits. It is easier to battle an external threat than to question whether the structure of your own life is guiding you toward wisdom or toward distraction. But turning away from the hidden does not make it disappear. What you refuse to confront eventually governs you. The first step is awareness. Awareness that beneath the noise of modern life lies a deeper battle for the human spirit. The battle between reflection and reaction, between focus and fragmentation, between meaning and emptiness, between identity and illusion. To face this battle is not to reject the modern world, but to navigate it with eyes open. The tools we have built are not our enemies, but they become dangerous when we forget that they are tools. Technologies serve humanity only when humanity retains the ability to question, to choose, to step back from the flow. To awaken in such a time is to reclaim what the age has quietly taken. The ability to think deeply, to feel honestly, to choose purposefully. It is to recognize that the greatest revolutions do not begin in laboratories or parliaments, but in the human mind. It is to understand that the transformation of civilization begins with the transformation of character. Transformation does not happen through noise or haste, but through awareness, discipline, and intention. To speak of secret crises is not to speak of doom. It is to speak of opportunity, an opportunity to rediscover what it means to be human at the very moments when that definition is being rewritten. For every crisis contains a hidden gift, the chance to correct the path before it becomes irreversible, the chance to recover the depth we have lost, the chance to rebuild the foundations of meaning on stronger ground, the chance to rise not by power or technology alone, but by wisdom. And wisdom begins with recognizing the illusions that surround us, the subtle forces that shape our desires, the stories we accept without question, the rhythms that direct our days. Wisdom begins when we ask not merely what can we do, but what should we do? Not merely what is possible, but what is worthy. Not merely what is efficient, but what is true. Wisdom begins when we slow down enough to notice the quiet shifts happening within us and around us. It begins when we reclaim ownership of our own attention, our own focus, our own identity, our own meaning. For what is a human being, if not the story they choose to live by? And what is a civilization, if not the shared story that gives shape to its collective future? If the stories weaken, the civilization falters. If the stories strengthen, the civilization rises. The crisis, then, is not merely in our technologies or our politics, but in the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and why we exist. To renew a story is to renew a people. And so the task before us is not a battle against machines or systems or networks. It is a battle for the soul of the age. A battle fought in the quiet places, in the choices we make each day, in the discipline of attention, in the courage to reflect, in the willingness to seek meaning, in the strength to remain human in a world that seeks to accelerate beyond humanity. The future will not be shaped by the loudest voices, but by the most aware minds. Not by those who react to every moment, but by those who understand the deeper currents beneath the moment. Not by those who surrender to the noise, but by those who learn to hear the silence beneath the noise. There is a truth that echoes across every age of human history, though each generation believes itself the first to face it. The truth is this: humanity's greatest crises are rarely the ones it recognizes in the moment. The crises we fear are almost never the ones that undo us. What devastates a people, what reshapes a world, what transforms the course of civilization, often arises not through catastrophe but through gradual change. Changes so subtle that they pass as progress, convenience, or inevitability. And yet within them, silent fault lines grow. We live in such a time now, a time when the world appears stable on the surface but trembles beneath. The crises of our era hide not in the dramatic events that fill our headlines, but in the quiet transformations that seep into our behaviors, our morals, our relationships, our desires, and the very way we conceive our future. Consider how previous civilizations met their ends. Rarely was it the final invasion, the final famine, the final natural disaster that brought them down. Those events were merely the last chapters. The true undoing happened long before, in the complacency that settled over them, in the loss of shared purpose, in the erosion of identity, in the abandonment of the virtues that once made them strong. And because these forces emerged gradually, the people did not see the danger until their fate was sealed. What appears normal in one generation becomes irreversible in the next.